Chosen one, the fact that this is reaching you right now, on this exact night, is not chance. You were led here by a hand higher than coincidence, because you just did something you were never supposed to be able to do, and you need to understand it before it slips away. What you did was not part of the original plan. You did not follow the script that fear and other people and an old version of you had written. You broke it, and where the plan ended, you did not stop. You wrote a new one, with your own hand, and somewhere above, watching, there was not disappointment that you went off the page. There was astonishment. You actually did it. But here is what no one is telling you tonight, and it is the reason you were guided to these words. What you did was not luck, and it was not some new personality you suddenly became. It was a state you entered, a real, physical state, a moment when the two halves of you that are almost always at odds fell into sync, and for the first time, you operated as your whole self. That is what let you become the author instead of the follower. And the danger, the reason this matters so much right now, is that unless you understand it, those two halves drift apart again, the old programming reclaims the pen, and you snap back to the script as if the whole thing never happened. So, let me be clear about what this is, and what it is not. This is not a message telling you to be proud of yourself and move on. This is the opposite. This is the warning and the key together. You touch something powerful, and powerful things fade when they are not understood. Tonight I am going to make sure you understand it, so the most important moment of your life so far does not become a memory, but a doorway you can walk through again and again. Here is what I am going to walk you through, and you have to stay to the end, because the part that makes it permanent comes late. First, I am going to show you what actually happened inside you the moment you went off the plan. Then I am going to show you why the old script will fight hardest to reclaim you in the hours right after, so you do not mistake that pull for the truth. After that, I am going to show you who you become when you stay the author. And, near the end, I am going to place in your hands the one thing that lets you enter that state again, on command. None of this works if you stay a spectator to your own breakthrough. So before we go deeper, I want you to plant a flag. If you know exactly the moment I am talking about, the thing you did that was not on the page, go to the comments and type 3 words. I did it. Not as a boast, as a refusal to ever hand back the pen. And I already hear the doubt rising, because it rises in everyone who has just crossed this line. You are thinking, what if it was a fluke? What if I cannot do it again? What if the real me is still the one who follows the script? Hold that fear right at the front of your mind, chosen one, because it is not the truth about you. It is the old plan fighting for its life. And by the end of tonight, you will know exactly how to win. So let us begin with what actually happened, because you deserve to understand your own breakthrough, not just celebrate it and lose it. For most of your life, you were running a plan you did not write. It came from 100 places, from people who told you what was realistic, from wounds that taught you to stay small, from an old version of you who decided, long ago, what you were and were not allowed to attempt. You did not experience it as a script. You experienced it as reality, as just the way things are, as simply who you are. But it was a script, and you had been reading your lines from it for years. And then, recently, something happened. In a moment, you may not even be able to fully explain, you stopped reading. You did the thing that was not written anywhere in the plan. Maybe you said the bold thing. Maybe you made the move everyone said you would never make. Maybe you simply refused, for once, to shrink. And in that moment, you were not following anymore. You were authoring. You reached past the edge of the page and wrote a line that had never existed, and the world rearranged itself around it. Now, here is the reframe that changes everything, and I want you to receive it slowly. A part of you has been quietly framing that moment as going off track, as a deviation, as something you got away with that you are not sure you were supposed to do. But that is the old script talking, because the script always calls authorship a mistake. What actually happened was not a derailment. It was a graduation. You crossed the line that separates the people who live inside a plan from the people who write one. And that line, chosen one, is the most important line a human being ever crosses. Think about what it means that heaven was astonished. Astonishment is not doubt. Heaven never doubted your worth. Astonishment is what happens when someone finally does the thing they were capable of all along but had never done. When potential that has been sealed for years suddenly moves in the world. It was not shock that you could. It was joy that you finally did. And that joy from above was real, and it was aimed at you, specifically. In the moment you picked up the pen. Let me say the heart of it as plainly as I can, because this single sentence is the spine of everything tonight. What you did was not you going off plan. It was the moment the two halves of you synced, and you became the author of your own life, instead of the reader of someone else's script. And the only danger now is drifting back out of sync and handing the pen back to the plan. That is the shift. Not, you got lucky. You entered a state, and states can be entered again. And notice the relief already moving in you. If it was a fluke, there would be nothing to do but hope it happens again. But if it was a state, a real alignment inside you, then returning to it is not a matter of luck at all. It is a matter of learning the way back in. Something in you has already begun to sense that, or these words would not be landing the way they are. You are closer to permanent than you think. Let me show you what's switched on. And consider the timing of it, because the timing itself is a message. This did not reach you a year ago, when you were still fully inside the plan and would not have understood a word of it. It reached you now, in the narrow window right after you crossed the line, when it can still make the difference between a breakthrough that sets and a breakthrough that fades. That is not how random things behave. That is how a message behaves when it was sent by someone watching closely, waiting for the exact moment you would need it most, and delivering it precisely then. So, let me name what happened inside you, because naming it is how you keep it. For most of your life, two parts of you have been pulling in different directions. There is the part that dreams, that sees the bigger move, that knows what you are capable of. And there is the part that manages, that follows the rules, that keeps you safe by keeping you inside the lines of the plan. Almost all the time, those two are out of sync. The dreamer proposes and the manager vetoes. The vision rises and the old programming files it under, not for someone like you. And so you stay on script, year after year, not because you lack the dream, but because the two halves never agree long enough to act. But in the moment you went off the plan, something rare happened. For a few seconds, or a few minutes, the two halves fell into sync. The dreamer and the manager stopped fighting and moved as one. And when that happens, you do not experience yourself as divided anymore. You experience a strange, clear power, a sense that you simply know what to do and do it, without the usual committee of doubt. That is the state that wrote the new plan, not a mood, not adrenaline, a synchronization of the two halves of you that were always meant to work together. I am going to give this a name so you can find your way back to it. We can call it the author state. The author state is what happens when the two halves of your mind lock into the same rhythm and the divided reader becomes a unified writer. In that state, the plan is no longer your master, it is your material. You do not ask the script for permission. You pick up the pen. Everything you have ever done that surprised even you, every bold move, every moment you rose above your own limits, happened in the author state, in a window when the two halves of you were briefly one. And here is what you most need to understand tonight. The author state is not who you occasionally get to be. It is who you actually are. Underneath, whenever the two halves are in sync. The follower, the small one, the reader of the script, That is not the real you. That is you divided. The author is you whole, which means the goal was never to become someone new. It was always to return, on purpose, to the synchronized state where the person you already are can finally act. But there is a reason the author state feels so rare, and I have to be honest about it, because it is exactly what will try to pull you back this week. The two halves of you do not stay in sync on their own. The moment the pressure passes, they drift apart again. The manager reasserts control, and the old programming steps back in to reclaim the pen. That is not failure. That is simply what happens when a synchronization is not anchored. And it is why so many people have one breakthrough and spend years trying to get back to it, never understanding that it was a state they could re-enter, not a lightning strike they had to wait for. To make it permanent, you first have to understand why the old script fights so hard to reclaim you, which is exactly where we go next. Let me make it concrete, because you will trust it more once you catch it in a memory of your own. Think of any time in your life you did something that surprised even you. A moment you spoke up when you always stay silent. A leap you took that the careful you would never have allowed. Afterward you probably said, "I do not know what came over me." But something did come over you, and it was not a stranger. It was your whole self. The two halves briefly synced, the author stepping forward while the manager was, for once, quiet. That feeling of, "I do not know what came over me," is the fingerprint of the author state. And the fact that you can name it now means you can begin to summon it instead of waiting for it to visit. So let me prepare you for what is coming, because forewarned is protected. In the hours and days right after you enter the author state, something predictable happens. The old script fights to reclaim you. It does not go quietly, because to the old programming, your breakthrough is not a triumph. It is a threat. For years, the plan kept you safe by keeping you small, and now you have proven the walls were never real, and the manager part of you panics. So it sends the oldest weapon it has, doubt. Watch for how it speaks, because it will not sound like an enemy. It will sound reasonable. It will say, "That was a one-time thing." It will say, "Do not get ahead of yourself." It will say, "Who do you think you are, going off plan like that?" and remind you of every past failure as evidence. It may even use exhaustion, a strange heaviness that arrives right after your boldest move, tempting you to rest all the way back into the old life. None of that is the truth. All of it is the script fighting for its life. The intensity of the pullback is not a sign you did something wrong. It is a sign you did something so right that the old programming is afraid. And here is what you must not do. You must not mistake the pullback for a verdict. Most people, right after a breakthrough, feel the doubt come flooding in and conclude that the doubt is the truth and the breakthrough was the illusion. They have it exactly backwards. The breakthrough was the truth. The doubt is the illusion, and it only came because the truth threatened it. If you can hold that line for the crucial hours ahead, the pullback loses its power and the new plan sets. Now let a new picture begin to form, because your future is built from the images you allow yourself to hold. Imagine the version of your life where you no longer lose the author state after every breakthrough. Imagine entering it not by accident, under pressure, once a year, but on purpose, whenever you choose. Imagine facing the next big move and feeling the two halves of you snap into sync on command, the dreamer and the manager working as one, the pen already in your hand. Picture a whole life authored instead of followed. A life where going beyond the plan is not a rare miracle, but simply how you operate. That is not a fantasy. That is what becomes possible once the author state is anchored. Feel what that image does in your body right now. The fear of losing it loosens. The dread of snapping back goes quiet. That loosening is not you imagining things. It is a preview, a small real taste of what it is to live from the author state as your home base rather than your exception. And if even that small taste can shift how you feel this moment, imagine what happens when the state does not fade after the pressure passes, but stays available whenever you reach for it. That is where tonight is going. But to get there, you have to understand how the two halves fell out of sync in the first place, because the origin holds the key to the repair. And there is a specific reason the pullback feels so physical, so heavy, so convincing. When the two halves of you drift back out of sync, it does not just change your thoughts. It changes your whole state. The clarity dims. The certainty that felt so solid an hour ago suddenly feels like arrogance. The body itself gets heavier, as if to say, sit back down, return to the plan, this is more comfortable. That heaviness is not wisdom, it is the feeling of the bridge going quiet again. And once you know that is what it is, you stop obeying it, because you can feel the difference between the truth of the author state and the fog of the desync trying to reclaim you. So where did the split come from? The one that keeps the dreamer and the manager at war and keeps you reading a script instead of writing one. Because you were not born divided. Watch a small child decide to do something, and you will see the author state in its pure form. When a young child wants to build, to climb, to create, the dreaming and the doing are one seamless motion. There is no committee, there is no plan they are afraid to violate, because they have not yet been handed one. That is your original design, chosen one. You began as an author. The split came later, and it came the way it comes for almost everyone who is truly chosen. Somewhere early, you authored something, you reached past the expected, and the world corrected you for it. Maybe you colored outside the lines and were shamed for the mess instead of praised for the daring. Maybe you announced a bold dream and were told to be realistic. Maybe you simply learned, through 100 small moments, that following the plan got you approval and safety, while writing your own got you trouble. And so a part of you made a quiet decision. It decided that the safest way to live was to hand the pen to the plan, to become an excellent reader of the script, and never risk the punishment of authorship again. That was not weakness. It was strategy. Handing over the pen kept you safe through seasons where authoring really was dangerous. But a strategy that stays on too long becomes a cage. The manager part of you never got the message that the danger had passed. So it kept guarding the plan, decade after decade, treating every impulse to author as a threat to be vetoed, keeping the two halves out of sync, so you could never again do the risky, powerful thing. Not out of malice, out of loyalty to an old rule that no longer applies. Do you feel the mercy in this? You are not a follower by nature. You are an author who was taught at real cost that authoring was unsafe, and who built a lifetime of caution around that lesson. And the manager who holds the plan has been so faithful, so tireless, that it is still vetoing your boldest moves decades later, keeping you inside the lines of a script you outgrew long ago. You cannot shame that part of you into standing down. It only guards the plan harder every time you attack it. The one thing that ever moves it is a signal clear enough and safe enough that even the manager relaxes and lets the two halves sync. And that is the whole game, chosen one. Not force, not white-knuckling your way to another breakthrough. What returns you to the author state is a signal so precisely tuned and so safe that both halves of you receive it at once. And remember, they were always meant to move as one. The dreamer and the manager, hearing the same true note, turning toward each other. When that happens, the split does not get fought. It simply has nothing left to divide, and you are the author again. The question is how you produce a signal that pure on purpose, instead of waiting for the next crisis to force it. That is exactly what I am going to answer now. And notice how much of your life the manager quietly runs. The job you took because it was safe instead of the one that called you. The words you swallowed because saying them felt too risky. The dream you filed away under someday. Each of those was the manager holding the pen, keeping the two halves out of sync, so the bold move could never happen. It was never that you lacked the vision. The vision was always there, on the other side of a bridge gone quiet. What you lacked was the sync that lets the vision reach your hands. Now I know a skeptical voice has been rising in you, and I respect it, so let us bring it into the room. Somewhere in you a voice is saying, maybe it was just confidence, maybe it was just luck, maybe I am reading too much into one good moment. You have had highs before that led nowhere. So you are cautious about calling this a state, a mechanism, a real thing. I want to honor that caution by telling you the truth. Confidence is a feeling, and feelings fade, which is exactly why confidence alone never made your breakthroughs last. What you touched was not a feeling. It was a way of operating, a synchronization you can point to by its results. You did not just feel bold. You acted beyond the plan, and it worked. In the real world, with consequences. That is not the fingerprint of a passing mood. That is the fingerprint of your whole self coming online. And a thing that produced real results in the world can be understood, and what can be understood can be returned to, which is more than confidence could ever promise you. And there is a second voice, older and more tired, that I will not talk past either. It says, I have had breakthroughs before and always slid back, so why would this time be different? If that weariness is yours, hear me gently. The reason you always slid back is not that you failed. It is that no one ever told you the breakthrough was a state you could re-enter. You thought it was lightning, so you waited for lightning.